For many years it was hoped biofuels would become the alternative energy source to fossil fuels. But Europe is learning it's not so easy. How to reduce the CO2 emissions that biofuels themselves produce, what targets to set for EU countries, and which biofuels to invest in. We got some civic organizations with special interest in biofuels to pose some questions to Parliament's rapporteur on the issue, Niels Torvalds. So, Mr. Torvalds, our first questions come from Friends of the Earth, Europe.
Evidence points to EU biofuels policy increasing competition for land and driving land grabs, especially in Africa and Southeast Asia. In some cases, communities face violence and lose their livelihoods. Mr. Torvalds, how do you respond to these failings?
Well, the question of land use in third world countries is a very sort of real one. But we can't actually solve all those problems. We have a provision in the ILUC file for granting the rights for the population, just to keep the big companies out from grabbing land, because land grabbing is of course a very serious thing, and it will probably be more serious also in the future. But from the European Parliament, we can't decide what everybody else is going to do in the world. So we have to take care of those questions for which we are responsible.
Because it's also a multilateral problem.
Some companies doesn't listen to us because they are outside our jurisdiction. So even if we know the problem, we can't always address the problems.
Let's go to the second question directly. This is a European Environmental Bureau.
Because of indirect land use change emissions, some biofuels, like biodiesel, that are currently subsidized under EU legislation, are not delivering greenhouse gas emission savings in comparison with the fossil fuels they are meant to replace. Bearing in mind that the Fuel Quality Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive were both established to mitigate climate change, how does your report address this fundamental problem?
Just for people to understand.
Yes.
So in fact, the problem is that with biofuels there were some myths, let's say, that today we accepted were not realistic, like biofuels were really bio, were really ecological friendly. In the reality, they produce sometimes more CO2 gases than other fossil fuels. Is it like that? Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, it's a very complicated problem.
Yes.
And depending on the feedstock you use, you actually could be producing more CO2 or less CO2. So it's a question of feedstock. What kind of feedstock do we use for producing ethanol or biodiesels? And to get this process forward, we need to open up for new technologies.
So what are you proposing now in your report? You propose, for instance, some caps, but these are reduced from the current legislations. Why? We are now, I mean, the proposal was before 10%, now we go to 6%. Why?
So what we are trying to do is to give those who are invested in old technologies, in bioethanol, a possibility to get some of their money back. At the same time, we are trying to open up for new technology. So this is a very delicate balance.
You mentioned bioethanol. We have a question from them. Let's listen to that, and then you can also explain me.
You publicly stated that you want first-generation biofuels produced by European farmers phased out after 2020, even the ones that are proven to have low indirect land use change risks. That will cost tens of thousands of long-term jobs. So why propose such a drastic policy?
Well, I don't think it's a honest argument, actually.
Why?
Because we can also create new jobs. It's not just a sort of jobs going away. By applying new technologies, we can create new jobs. So again, we have to find a balance.
I go to my last question, which comes from a sector, biodiesel, who received until now a lot of money, because we have to remember that this sector has been financing a lot by European money. So let's listen to that.
How do you plan safeguarding the current investment done in the European biodiesel industry Because if there is an ILUC factor as defined now in the directive, our industry will be dead.
What we are facing is very heavy lobbying, where everybody is looking at his or her very narrow interests. And my point is not to go where the lobbyists want me to go. My job is to get a decent law through the European Parliament.
How much is the financing of biofuels today in Europe?
I have no idea.
10 billions?
Because that's again mostly state money, so member state money. It's very sure that we won't be able to get a decent market just by financing through state aid. Therefore, my proposition was that we should find for the future a blending mandate so that we create a real market for biodiesel.
So do you still think there is a huge potential from these biofuels?
First of all, I think we actually have a technological breakthrough. We have more possibilities to mitigate CO2 than ever before. And at the same time, we have a very serious problem concerning fossil fuels in Europe, because most of the fossil fuels coming to Europe is coming from Russia.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you. I'm going to need that.
It seems to me